The humid air of Xylos clung to Commander Valerius Kane's skin like a second layer of combat gear. Droplets of sweat traced paths down his temples as he squinted through the dense foliage of the alien rainforest. His pulse remained steady despite the tension gripping his squad. After 15 years of military service, Kane had mastered the art of appearing unshakable, even when surrounded by a hostile environment that seemed determined to reject human presence at every turn. Movement at 2 o'clock. Lieutenant Eva Rostova whispered through their secured comm channel, her voice terse. Thermal signatures suggest a Xylosian patrol, approximately 6 individuals. Kane acknowledged with a slight nod, signaling his squad to maintain position. The Terran Expeditionary Force had been fighting the indigenous Xylosians for control of this resource-rich world for nearly 3 years now. What had begun as a mining operation for rare energy crystals had escalated into a full-scale military conflict when the reptilian natives proved to be both intelligent and unwilling to surrender their territorial claims. Jade-scale clan markings, Sergeant Miller added, his enhanced optics providing detail through the thick vegetation. Elite warriors. The Jade-scale clan, notorious for their ferocity and tactical brilliance. Kane's intel briefings had dedicated entire sections to this particular faction of Xylosian society. Their warriors were known to fight to the death rather than surrender. Hold positions, Kane ordered. Let them pass. We're here for reconnaissance, not engagement. But fate had other plans. A sharp crack echoed through the forest as Private Jenkins stepped on a rotting branch, the sound amplified by the unnatural stillness of the alien jungle. In an instant, the forest erupted into chaos. The Xylosian patrol sprang into action with reptilian quickness, their scaled bodies moving with fluid grace despite their imposing size. Plasma fire cut through the air, accompanied by the distinctive, shrieking war cries that had become the soundtrack of this interplanetary conflict. Defensive positions. Kane barked, returning fire with practiced precision. Rostova, flank left. Miller, covering fire. The skirmish was brief, but intense. TEF's superior weaponry against the Xylosians' knowledge of the terrain and almost supernatural agility. When the dust settled, 4 of the alien warriors lay motionless on the forest floor, their scales dulled in death. 2 had managed to escape into the dense undergrowth, likely to report back to their clan leaders. Kane was about to order his squad to move out when a faint rustle caught his attention. Behind a massive, twisted-root structure, barely visible in the filtered green light, lay a wounded Xylosian warrior. The alien's jade scales were marred with dark, viscous blood, and one leg appeared severely damaged. Despite the injury, there was something regal in the way the warrior held itself, something that commanded respect even in defeat. It was a female, Kane realized as he approached cautiously, weapon raised. Female Xylosians were slightly smaller than their male counterparts, but often more dangerous, quicker, more agile, and rumored to be more cunning in combat. What happened next would haunt Kane's dreams for months to come. The female warrior, her elaborate scale patterns and battle markings identifying her as someone of significant rank, looked directly at him with slitted, amber eyes. Then, to the astonishment of Kane and his entire squad, she dropped her weapon and sank to her knees in a gesture that appeared unmistakably like surrender. "Don't kill me, human," she said in thickly accented but intelligible English, her normally intimidating voice reduced to a pleading tone. "I'll warm your bed." Kane froze, his finger hovering over the trigger. In 3 years of brutal conflict, he had never witnessed a Xylosian surrender. They fought to the death, or if captured, they typically engaged in suicide rituals rather than endure captivity. This deviation from everything he knew about their warrior culture was shocking enough, but the nature of her plea left him completely stunned. "Commander?" Rostova questioned from behind him, her weapon still trained on the kneeling alien. The lieutenant's voice carried a clear suggestion: eliminate the threat and move on. But curiosity stayed Kane's hand. "Secure her," he ordered instead. "We're taking her back to base." Rostova's disapproval was evident even through her tactical helmet. "Sir," Regulations state. I know the regulations, Lieutenant. Kane cut her off. This is a high-value intelligence opportunity. Jade Scale Clan. Possibly a war chief based on her markings. Command will want to question her. It was a thin justification, and they both knew it. Standard protocol for dangerous combatants was clear, especially when operating in hostile territory with limited resources. But something about the warriors unexpected. Pleaded triggered Kane's long-dormant sense of curiosity. After years of fighting an enemy he barely understood, perhaps this was an opportunity to gain insight into the Xylosian mind. The alien warrior remained unervingly compliant as they bound her wounds and secured her with specialized restraints designed to handle the superior strength of Xylosian physiology. She made no attempt to resist, watching Kane with those unreadable amber eyes that seemed to perceive more than they revealed. "What's your name?" Kane asked as they prepared to move out. The alien tilted her head slightly, a gesture he had observed before in their species, something like contemplation. "Lyra," she replied, the name sounding both melodic and harsh in her reptilian voice. "I am called Lyra." The journey back to forward operating base Helios was tense. Every member of Kane's squad remained on high alert, expecting an ambush or some form of treachery from their unusual prisoner. Rostova especially kept a vigilant eye on Lyra, her hand never straying far from her sidearm. Kane himself found his thoughts troubled. The Xylosian's unexpected plea replayed in his mind. "I'll warm your bed, not spare my life, or I have valuable information." The specific phrasing suggested cultural connotations he didn't understand. Was it a literal offer, a euphemism, or something with deeper significance in Xylosian society? Upon reaching the FOB, Kane's decision to bring back a live Xylosian warrior caused the expected stir. Medical personnel approached with caution, intelligence officers hovered impatiently, and base security implemented additional containment protocols. Through it all, Lyra remained oddly serene, her reptilian features giving away little of her thoughts. "This is highly irregular, Commander." Colonel Bishop, the base commander, stated flatly during the hastily organized debriefing. "Bringing a high-risk hostile into our secure facility." "With respect, sir," Kane interrupted, "we've been fighting these people for 3 years and still know next to nothing about their society, their motivations, or their command structure. This warrior surrendered voluntarily, using our language. That alone warrants investigation." Bishop remained unconvinced. "And this unusual phrase she used, you believe it has intelligence value?" Kane hesitated. "I believe it may provide cultural insight, sir. Understanding their concepts of surrender and hierarchy could be tactically significant." After much debate, Kane was granted temporary authority over the prisoner, with strict security protocols in place. Lyra would be held in a specialized containment cell, monitored continuously, and interrogated for any valuable intelligence she might possess. The unspoken understanding was clear. The moment her usefulness ended, so would the unusual arrangement. The first formal interrogation session proved both fascinating and frustrating. Lyra sat across from Kane in the sterile interrogation room, her scaled form incongruous against the utilitarian Terran furniture. Her wounds had been treated, though the medical staff had approached the task with visible discomfort. Xylosian physiology remained largely mysterious to human medicine. "Why did you surrender?" Kane began, choosing directness. "Your kind doesn't surrender." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, her pupils contracting to thin vertical slits in the bright lighting. "My clan was losing position. I was separated from my clutch mates. Survival dictated new strategy. And your offer to warm my bed? What did that mean exactly?" A sound emerged from Lyra that Kane hadn't heard before, something between a hiss and what might have been a laugh. "Your kind understands so little of ours. For cold bloods, sharing body heat is..." She paused, seemingly searching for the right words. "Sacred submission. Greatest vulnerability. Greatest trust. I offer service and loyalty in exchange for protection. Cold bloods." Kane seized on the unfamiliar term. "My caste. The warriors, hunters, laborers. We serve the warm bloods who rule." She shifted slightly, her scales catching the light. Your kind resembles warm bloods in some ways. Similar thermal patterns. Similar arrogance. The comment carried an edge that reminded Kane she was no ordinary prisoner. Despite her surrender, Lyra retained a dignity and intelligence that demanded respect. Over the following days, Kane spent hours interrogating Lyra, gradually piecing together fragments of Xylosian society. He learned of their complex clan structure, the division between warm-blood rulers and cold-blood servants, and the elaborate system of loyalties that bound their society together. Lyra's Jadescale clan was one of several cold-blood castes that had recently fallen out of favor with the dominant warm-blood rulers. Most fascinating was Lyra's gradual revelation that the conflict between humans and Xylosians was not viewed uniformly across their society. There were factions, political rivalries, and power struggles that mirrored human politics in unexpected ways. This war serves some more than others, Lyra explained during their 5th session. Zark, the Crimson Throat warlord, gains power with each battle. His alliance with Warmbloods grows stronger while my clan diminishes. Kane found himself increasingly intrigued not just by the tactical information Lyra provided, but by the alien herself, her intelligence, her adaptability, and the subtle shifts in her behavior as she became more accustomed to human presence. She was a predator by nature. He never forgot that, but she was also a sentient being with complex thoughts and emotions, however alien they might be. Lieutenant Rostova remained unconvinced. "She's manipulating you, Commander," she warned after observing one of the interrogation sessions. "These creatures are cunning. Whatever information she's feeding you is calculated to serve her own interests." "All intelligence assets have their own agendas, Lieutenant," Kane replied. "That doesn't make the information worthless. And the way she watches you, you don't find that concerning." Rostova pressed. "Like she's studying your weaknesses." Perhaps she was right. Kane had noticed Lyra's focused attention, the way those amber eyes tracked his movements and reactions. But he interpreted it differently, as the natural vigilance of a creature adapted to survival in a hostile environment. Or perhaps as genuine curiosity about a species so different from her own. What Kane didn't know was that Rostova had begun filing separate reports with Colonel Thorne, the ambitious regional commander who had long viewed Kane as an obstacle to his career advancement. Thorne, who had recently arrived in neighboring bays to oversee a classified operation, received Rostova's concerns with great interest. "Continue monitoring the situation, Lieutenant," Thorne instructed during their secure communication. "Document any irregularities in Commander Kane's behavior or judgment. This alien prisoner may prove useful in more ways than one." Meanwhile, Kane's sessions with Lyra grew increasingly productive. The initial awkwardness of their interactions gave way to a tentative understanding. Kane adapted the environment to accommodate Lyra's physiological needs, adjusting the temperature to suit her cold-blooded metabolism and providing nutrient supplements that their medical staff determined might be compatible with her biology. In return, Lyra became more forthcoming, though always careful not to provide information that might directly endanger her own people. She explained the significance of various Xylosian customs and gestures. She demonstrated how their writing system worked by scratching symbols into the soft surface of her meal tray. She even attempted to clarify the complex hierarchy of Xylosian social relationships. "In your terms," she explained, "warm-bloods are like your aristocracy, born to rule. Cold-bloods serve according to caste and clan. My clan, Jadescale, were once honored warriors. Now we are expendable. Because of the war with us?" Kane asked. Lyra made a gesture he had come to recognize as negation. "Started before your arrival. Zark's faction gained favor with Warmbloods, offered them something valuable. My clan resisted his rise." "What did he offer them?" Lyra's expression changed subtly, her scales shifting in what Kane had learned to recognize as discomfort or hesitation. "Knowledge. Access to the sacred places beneath." "Sacred places? You mean underground formations?" "Caves. Not caves. The network. The biolumina. It flows beneath all xylos, connects all life. She seemed frustrated by the limitations of language. Your kind seeks energy crystals on surface. True power lies deeper. Zark knows this. Helps certain humans find access points. Kane felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Are you saying there's collaboration between this Zark and human forces? Lyra's gaze intensified. Not all humans. Select few. Those who seek power, not just resources. The implications were disturbing. If true, it suggested that elements within the TEF might be engaged in unauthorized negotiations with Xylosian factions, potentially undermining both the official military campaign and any possibility of legitimate diplomatic relations in the future. Kane needed more information, but Lyra had reached her limit for the day. The medical staff had warned him that extended interrogation sessions could stress her cold-blooded system, which required regular periods of rest and thermal regulation. As guards escorted Lyra back to her containment cell, Kane found himself troubled by more than just the potential security breach she had hinted at. He was becoming increasingly aware of a shift in his own perception, seeing Lyra less as an alien prisoner and more as a person with her own valid perspective on the conflict that had engulfed both their species. This uncomfortable realization was interrupted by an urgent summons from Colonel Bishop. Kane found the base commander reviewing sensor data with a grim expression. We've detected unusual energy signatures 15 clicks southeast of our position, Bishop explained without preamble. Intelligence suggests it may be a gathering of Jade Scale clan members, possibly preparing for an assault on our eastern perimeter. Kane studied the data, something about the patterns triggering his suspicion. This doesn't match previous Jade Scale tactics, sir. They typically avoid direct confrontation with our forward bases. Nevertheless, we need to investigate, Bishop replied. I'm authorizing a reconnaissance mission. Your familiarity with Jade-scale behavior makes you the obvious choice to lead it. Something felt wrong, but Kane couldn't pinpoint the source of his unease. Yes, sir. When do we deploy? 0600 tomorrow. Small team, maximum stealth. Bishop's expression hardened. And Commander? This mission is classified. No discussing operational details with the prisoner, regardless of how cooperative she's been. Kane assembled a 4-person team. Himself, Sergeant Miller, Corporal Zhang, and Private Diaz. Lieutenant Rostova was conspicuously absent, assigned to base security duties by Colonel Bishop's direct order. The mission began as planned, their transport dropping them 5 kilometers from the target area to minimize detection. The jungle seemed more oppressive than usual, the alien vegetation pressing in around them as they moved silently through the undergrowth. The humidity was suffocating, reducing visibility and playing havoc with their thermal imaging. Energy signatures intensifying ahead, Miller reported as they approached the coordinates. But something's off, Commander. The pattern is too regular, almost artificial. Kane felt that same sense of wrongness he'd experienced during the briefing. Maintain alert status. This could be. He never finished the sentence. The jungle erupted around them, but not with Xylosian warriors as expected. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by TEF soldiers in unmarked combat gear, weapons trained on Kane's team. Commander Kane, a familiar voice called from behind the line of soldiers. Colonel Thorne stepped forward, his expression neutral but his eyes cold. Lower your weapons. That's an order. Confusion rippled through Kane's team, but years of military discipline held. They lowered their weapons, though Kane noted Miller's finger remained tellingly close to his trigger. Colonel Thorne, Kane acknowledged, keeping his voice level. I wasn't aware you were operating in this sector. Special operations often require discretion, Commander. Thorne gestured, and his men moved to secure Kane's team's weapons. I'm afraid I need to detain you pending an investigation into serious security concerns. What concerns? Kane demanded, though a sinking feeling told him he already knew. Compromised loyalties, unauthorized sharing of classified information with an enemy combatant, possible strategic sabotage. Thorne listed the charges with almost casual disdain. Lieutenant Rostova has provided quite detailed reports about your unusual relationship with the Xylosian prisoner. So Rostova had been spying for Thorn. The realization stung, though Kane admitted to himself that her concerns hadn't been entirely unfounded. His conventional treatment of Lyra might easily be misinterpreted by someone viewing the situation through the lens of strict military protocol. My interrogation methods have been producing valuable intelligence, Kane stated firmly, all of which has been properly documented and reported. Have they? Thorn smiled thinly. Including the intelligence about collaborative efforts between TEF personnel and Xylosian factions? That particular piece of information seems to have been omitted from your official reports. The trap became clear. Somehow, Thorn had learned about Lyra's claims regarding human collaboration with Zark. Whether through surveillance of the interrogation room or through other means, he had information Kane had intended to verify before reporting. And suddenly, with terrible clarity, Kane understood. Thorn wasn't investigating these claims. He was implicated in them. The realization must have shown on his face, because Thorn's smile widened fractionally. Take him back to base. Separate containment, no communication. As Thorn's men moved to restrain them, chaos erupted from the jungle perimeter. Plasma fire cut through the air, striking two of Thorn's soldiers. Reptilian forms moved with blinding speed through the undergrowth, attacking with precision. Ambush, someone shouted, and battle consumed the clearing. In the confusion, Kane felt a scaled hand close around his arm with surprising strength. He turned to find himself face to face with Lyra, her amber eyes intense, a stolen TF sidearm. In her other hand, "Now you believe?" she hissed. "Zark's alliance with your Thorn threatens all. Come if you want to live." Questions flooded Kane's mind. How she had escaped, how she had found them, why she had chosen to intervene, but survival took precedence. He signaled to his team, who were already taking advantage of the chaos, to reclaim their weapons. "This way," Lyra urged, pulling him toward a dense section of undergrowth that somehow parted at her touch, revealing a hidden path. "My clanmates will cover our retreat." The revelation that the attackers were Jade-scale warriors raised new questions, but Kane had no time to voice them. He and his team followed Lyra into the hidden path, the sounds of battle fading behind them as the jungle seemed to close ranks, concealing their escape route. They moved rapidly through the forest, Lyra leading with the confidence of one born to this environment. Kane noted how different she appeared now. No longer the compliant prisoner, but a warrior in her element, her movements fluid and purposeful. After what felt like hours of travel, they reached a natural formation of massive tree roots that created a sheltered hollow. Inside, several other Xylosians waited, their jade scales identifying them as members of Lyra's clan. They regarded the humans with obvious suspicion, but made no hostile moves. "You brought us to your people," Kane observed, still processing the implications. "Why?" Lyra conferred briefly with the other Xylosians in their sibilant native language before turning back to Kane. "Because war serves neither your kind nor mine. Only Zark and your Thorn benefit. They seek control of bioluminescent network for themselves." "The energy source you mentioned," Kane recalled. "What exactly is it?" An older Xylosian stepped forward, his scales dulled with age, but his eyes sharp. "Not just energy source," he said in halting English. "Life source. Ancient system beneath surface. Connected to all Xylos ecology. Conscious, some believe." "Conscious," Miller echoed skeptically. "You're saying it's alive?" "More than alive," Lyra explained. "It is. Connection. Balance. Without it, Xylos dies. With it controlled by wrong hands." She left the implication hanging. Kane looked around at the gathered Xylosians, noting the variety in their scale patterns and the signs of hardship evident in their lean forms and battle-scarred hides. "These aren't just your clanmates," he realized. "These are refugees." Lyra nodded. "From many clans. All cold-bloods who resist Zark's alliance with warm-bloods and humans. We hide. We survive. We preserve ancient knowledge of network." The elder Xylosian spoke again. "Zark and human Thorn find ancient access point. Plan to use human technology, warm blood ritual, to control network. Then eliminate all opposition, human and Xylosian alike. Kane exchanged glances with his team. The story seemed fantastic, yet it aligned with too many inconsistencies he had observed throughout the campaign. The unusual deployment patterns, the classified operations that yielded no apparent strategic advantage, the shifting objectives that seemed disconnected from the TEF's stated goals. "How did you escape?" he asked Lyra. "And how did you find us?" "Your female soldier, cold eyes, watches always. She helps Thorns set trap for you. I hear guards speak of mission, a betrayal planned." Lyra's expression shifted in what Kane now recognized as anger. "I use weakness in containment field. Guards not expect cold blood to survive low temperatures." She gestured to the other Xylosians. "My clan tracks you. We watch. We wait. When trap springs, we act. And now," Kane prompted, "what's your plan?" The Elder and Lyra exchanged looks. "Network access point located beneath human base," the Elder explained. "Where your Thorn operates. Zark brings warm blood priests there tonight. Ritual begins at moon zenith. If they succeed," Lyra added, "control of network gives them power over all Xylo's environment. Weather, terrain, life itself becomes weapon. Your kind will be driven off-world or exterminated. My kind who resist will face same fate." Kane considered their options. His team was competent but small. The Xylosian refugees were clearly fighters, but unlikely to be numerous enough to mount a frontal assault on a TEF base. And they faced opposition not just from Thorn's forces, but from Zark's Xylosian loyalists as well. "We need allies," he concluded. "Is there anyone at base Helios we can trust? Anyone who might listen if we present evidence of Thorn's conspiracy?" Sergeant Miller spoke up. "Colonel Bishop. He's by the book, but he's honest. If we can get concrete proof to him." Lyra tilted her head. "Your female soldier, the one who betrayed, she may not know full truth. She serves Thorn but believes in your military honor. If shown true plan." Kane finished the thought. "Rostova might switch sides if she understood the real stakes." It was a slim hope, but they had few options. "We need to get into Thorn's base, gather evidence of this bioluminescent network and their plans for it, and somehow transmit that information to Bishop and anyone else who might listen. We know way in," the Elder Xylosian offered. "Ancient tunnels beneath surface connect to human structure. Network paths, not known to Zark or Warmbloods." A plan began to form. Dangerous, desperate, but with a slim chance of success. Kane's team would infiltrate Thorn's base through the Xylosian tunnels, accompanied by Lyra and a small group of her clanmates who knew the network paths. Their objective: document the conspiracy, disrupt the ritual if possible, and transmit evidence to TEF High Command. As they prepared for the mission, Kane found a moment alone with Lyra. The questions that had been building since her unexpected rescue could no longer be contained. "Back at the ambush site," he began, "you could have left us to die. Thorn's men and your enemies would have eliminated each other. Why risk yourself and your clan to save us?" Lyra's amber eyes studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond surface thoughts. "I gave word," she said simply. "When I knelt before you, offered to warm your bed, is sacred pledge of loyalty. Even though you were a prisoner, under duress, choice made freely, even in captivity. You showed respect, listened, learned." Her scaled hand made a gesture that encompassed their current situation. "Now see result. Trust between our kinds. Possibility of different future." There was more to it than that. Complex cultural nuances he still didn't fully grasp, but Kane understood the essential truth. Despite everything their species had done to each other, Lyra had recognized in him a potential ally, someone who might bridge the divide between their worlds. And now, against all odds, they were about to attempt exactly that. The infiltration began at nightfall. The Xylosian tunnels were unlike anything Kane had ever experienced. Not simply physical passages, but living conduits that seemed to pulse with subtle bioluminescence. The network that Lyra had described became less abstract as they traveled deeper, its presence manifest in threads of light that ran like veins through the rock and soil. Their Xylosian guides moved with reverent care, touching certain nodes to request passage, avoiding others with superstitious dread. Kane and his team followed their example, increasingly aware that they were traversing something more complex than mere tunnels. The network responds to intent, Lyra explained in hushed tones. It senses hostility, greed, harmony. This is why Zark and Thorn need ritual and technology together, to mask their true purpose from network consciousness. After what felt like hours of carefully navigated passages, they reached a section where the natural tunnels intersected with manufactured structures, the foundations of Thorn's base. Their Xylosian guides identified a maintenance access point with minimal security, allowing them to infiltrate the facility. Moving through the base required all their stealth skills. Kane's military credentials granted them access through some security checkpoints, but they had to avoid personnel who might recognize them as unauthorized. Lyra and her clanmates attracted particular attention despite their attempts to remain hidden. Xylosians inside a TEF facility was an alarming sight under any circumstances. Their first objective was to locate the ritual site and gather intelligence on Thorn's plans. Following the increasing density of network filaments visible only to Xylosian perception, they made their way to a restricted section deep within the base. What they found exceeded Kane's worst expectations. A vast chamber had been excavated beneath the base, revealing an enormous node of the bioluminescent network, a pulsating core of interwoven light strands that illuminated the space with an eerie, shifting glow. Around it, TEF scientists operated equipment that appeared to be monitoring and somehow interfacing with the living energy system. And at the center of the operation stood Colonel Thorn, deep in conversation with a Xylosian whose crimson throat scales marked him unmistakably as Zark. They observed from a concealed position as Thorn and Zark inspected a device being installed at the edge of the network node, something that combined TEF technology with components of clear Xylosian origin. The biomechanical interface is ready, one of the scientists reported. Once activated, it should allow controlled redirection of the network's energy pathways according to program parameters. And a warm blood ritual? Thorn asked, turning to Zark. The Xylosian warlord made a gesture of affirmation. My priests prepare. When your machine creates access point, they will establish dominance pattern within network consciousness. Resistance will be neutralized. The cold calculation in both there. Voices sent a chill through Kane. This wasn't merely about resource control or military advantage. They were discussing weaponizing an entire planet's ecosystem against both humans and Xylosians who opposed them. We have what we need, Kane whispered to his team. Let's find a communications terminal and transmit this evidence to Bishop and TEF Command. As they retreated from their observation point, disaster struck. A security patrol rounded the corner, coming face to face with their group. The brief moment of shocked silence erupted into chaos as both sides reached for weapons. Gunfire and plasma blasts echoed through the corridors. Alarms blared, and security lockdown protocols engaged throughout the facility. Kane's team fought desperately alongside their Xylosian allies, but they were rapidly outnumbered as Thorn's forces converged on their position. Fall back to the tunnels, Kane ordered. We need to reach a communication station before they cut off all access. They fought their way through the facility, their unlikely alliance of humans and Xylosians creating confusion among Thorn's personnel, some of whom hesitated to fire on TEF uniforms. This momentary advantage allowed them to reach a secondary communications center, but not without casualties. 2 of Lyra's clanmates fell protecting their retreat, and Corporal Zhang took a plasma blast to the shoulder that left him barely able to stand. As Miller and Diaz secured the room, Kane worked frantically to establish a secure channel to Colonel Bishop at Base Helios. Lyra stood guard at his side, her stolen weapon held with the confidence of a born warrior. Base Helios, this is Commander Kane. Emergency Protocol Omega 73. I need to speak with Colonel Bishop immediately. Static answered him, then a burst of interference. The communications were being jammed. They're blocking all outgoing signals, Miller reported grimly. Keep trying different frequencies, Kane ordered. There has to be. The door to the communications center slid open. Lieutenant Rostova stood in the doorway, weapon drawn, but not yet aimed directly at them. Her expression was a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and what might have been the first stirrings of doubt. "Commander," she said, her gaze moving from Kane to Lyra to the rest of the battered group. "What is the meaning of this? You're collaborating with the enemy." "The real enemy isn't who you think, Lieutenant," Kane replied carefully. "Colonel Thorne has made a secret alliance with a Xylosian warlord. They're planning to use this planet's biological network as a weapon against both our species." Disbelief warred with uncertainty on Rostova's face. "That's absurd. Colonel Thorne is a decorated officer with an exemplary record. He's using you," Lyra interjected, her reptilian voice surprisingly gentle. "As he uses my kind. For power. For control." Rostova's weapon shifted to target Lyra. "Silence, alien. Commander, I respected you. Followed you. How could you betray everything we stand for?" "I haven't betrayed anything, Eva," Kane said, deliberately using her first name to break through the military formality. "I'm trying to prevent a massacre and possibly save this planet. Thorne and Zark are activating a device that will give them control over Xylos's biological systems. They plan to eliminate all opposition, human and Xylosian." Rostova's resolve wavered visibly. I was ordered to report on your interactions with the prisoner, to document security concerns, not to facilitate genocide." Kane finished for her. "I know. You were doing your duty as you understood it. But now I'm asking you to look at the evidence and make your own judgment." He gestured to the communications console. "Help us contact Bishop. See the proof for yourself. If I'm wrong, you can arrest me yourself once this is over." For a moment that stretched into eternity, Rostova stood frozen in indecision. Then, with military precision, she lowered her weapon and moved to the console. "The primary channels are blocked, but there's an emergency protocol that bypasses standard communications," she explained, her fingers flying over the controls. "If we encode the transmission through maintenance channels." A moment later, Colonel Bishop's voice crackled through the speaker. "This is Bishop. Who am I speaking with?" "The channel identifier is garbled." Kane quickly explained the situation, transmitting the surveillance footage they had captured of Thorne's operation with the network node. Bishop's initial skepticism gave way to grave concern as the evidence mounted. "This is extremely disturbing, Commander," Bishop acknowledged. "If accurate, it represents treason of the highest order. I'm dispatching security teams to your location immediately, but it will take time for them to reach you." "Tommy may not have, sir," Kane warned. "The activation sequence is already underway. Once Thorne and Zark gain control of this bioluminescent network, they'll be able to manipulate the entire planet against us." "What do you propose, Commander?" Kane looked at Lyra, who had been conferring urgently with the elder Xylosian. She turned to address both Kane and the communication link. "The network cannot be controlled through force without causing catastrophic destabilization," she explained. "Thorne and Zark's attempt will trigger planetary response. Storms, seismic activity, biological defense mechanisms. But there is another way. The ancient communion," the elder added. "Cold blood and warm blood together, offering balance instead of dominance. It requires representatives of both kinds who seek harmony, not control." Kane understood immediately. "You mean a human and a Xylosian, working together to counteract what Thorne and Zark are doing?" "Yes," Lyra confirmed. "The network responds to intention. If we can access the node, establish connection with pure intent, we might redirect their corruption." Colonel Bishop's voice came through the speaker, heavy with the weight of command decisions. "This is beyond any protocol we have, Commander. I cannot officially authorize such action." A brief pause, then, "However, I also cannot officially forbid actions taken by personnel operating in an emergency situation with no clear chain of command. Do what you must to prevent catastrophe. Reinforcements are en route." It was as close to approval as they would get. Kane turned to his team. "Miller, Diaz, Zhang, help Lieutenant Rostova secure this position and maintain communication with Bishop. We'll need an extraction point once this is over." He turned to Lyra. I assume you're coming with me? The reptilian warrior's amber eyes held his gaze. As I pledged. To warm your bed, to stand by your side. They moved swiftly through the facility's corridors, guided by Lyra's elder and the increasingly visible filaments of the bioluminescent network that seemed to pulse more urgently with each passing minute. Alarms continued to wail throughout the base, but the security forces appeared to be concentrating around the main control room, leaving their route relatively clear. As they approached the massive chamber housing the network node, the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. The distant sound of chanting, presumably the warm blood ritual, echoed through the corridors, accompanied by the electronic hum of advanced machinery powering up. We're too late to stop the activation, the elder Xylosian whispered, his age scales paling with concern. The communion must happen quickly or all is lost. They found a maintenance access point that opened into the chamber from an elevated position, allowing them to observe without immediate detection. The scene below had transformed since their earlier reconnaissance. The network node now blazed with unnatural patterns of light, its natural blue-green luminescence increasingly shot through with angry red pulses. Thorn stood at a control console, monitoring readouts as technicians made adjustments to equipment. Zark presided over a circle of Xylosians with elaborate scale patterns. Warm bloods, Kane presumed, who performed synchronized movements around a smaller interface node that pulsed in rhythm with their ritual. The synchronization is at 60%, one of the technicians reported. Bioneural pathways are aligning with the control matrix. Thorn nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Zark, how much longer for the ritual component? The Xylosian warlord's voice carried across the chamber. Communion paths open. Dominance patterns establishing. Network resistance fading. As if in response to his words, the entire node flashed with brilliant intensity, and Kane felt the structure around them shudder. Red warning lights activated on several consoles. Seismic activity detected throughout the region, a technician called out. The network is responding defensively. Zark hissed in irritation. Expected resistance. Continue ritual. Force submission. The elder clutched Kane's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. The network fights them, but it cannot hold. They break natural laws. We must establish counter-communion immediately. Kane looked at Lyra. What exactly do we need to do? Physical contact with network, she explained. Mental openness. Shared purpose between human and Xylosian. The network must recognize harmony, not just sense resistance to domination. It sounded mystical, beyond Kane's scientific understanding, but he had seen enough of Xylos's strange biological systems to accept that there were forces at work beyond conventional Terran science. How do we get down there without being shot immediately? He asked, eyeing the armed guards positioned around the chamber. The answer came in the form of another tremor, more violent than the first. Equipment toppled. An alarm shrieked as emergency protocols engaged. In the confusion, Lyra pointed to a maintenance ladder that would take them directly to a section of exposed network filaments near the edge of the main node. Now, she urged, while they struggled with containment, they descended rapidly, the elder remaining behind to cover their approach. The chamber had fallen into controlled chaos, with technicians scrambling to stabilize equipment and guards responding to new security alerts. Thorn and Zark remained focused on their control interfaces, shouting orders as the network's resistance intensified. Kane and Lyra reached the floor and moved swiftly between banks of equipment, using the confusion as cover. They were nearly at the network access point when shout went up. Intruders at the southern perimeter. It's Kane. Weapons fire erupted around them. Kane returned fire while Lyra moved with blinding reptilian speed, disarming the nearest guard with a precise strike. They fought their way to the network filaments, now just meters away. Cover me, Lyra called, making a final dash toward the pulsing strands of living light. Kane provided suppressing fire, keeping the guards at bay as Lyra reached the network. She plunged her scaled hands directly into the glowing filaments, then turned back toward Kane, her amber eyes wide with urgency. Now, join with me. Kane made his decision. Holstering his weapon, he sprinted to her side. Even as plasma fire scorched the air around him, a blast grazed his shoulder, sending sharp pain through his arm, but he pressed on, reaching Lyra's position at the network interface. "What do I?" he began, but Lyra simply grabbed his hands and pulled them into the luminous strands alongside her own. The sensation defied description. It was as though every cell in Kane's body suddenly connected to something vast and incomprehensibly complex. Information, or something like it, flooded his consciousness. Not words or images exactly, but impressions of life, of cycles, of interconnection across an entire living world. And he felt Lyra there too, her consciousness intertwined with his within the network. Her thoughts, her memories, her fierce determination to save her world became accessible to him just as his became accessible to her. The barriers between species fell away within the communion, revealing a shared core of sentience that transcended their biological differences. Together, they pushed back against the corruption spreading through the network, the forced domination that Thorn and Zark were attempting to impose. Kane projected his commitment to balance, to coexistence, to mutual respect between species. Lyra added her deep understanding of Xylos' natural systems and her cultural connection to the network's ancient patterns. Across the chamber, Thorn noticed what was happening. "Stop them," he shouted. "They're interfering with the control matrix." Guards moved to intervene, but another violent tremor shook the facility, more powerful than before. Equipment exploded in showers of sparks, and structural supports began to fail. The network node itself pulsed with increasing intensity, the red corruption fading as the natural blue-green luminescence reasserted itself. Zark abandoned his ritual circle, charging toward Kane and Lyra with murderous intent. "The communion is mine to control," he raged, drawing a ceremonial blade. "The network belongs to the Warmbloods." Before he could reach them, a plasma blast struck him squarely in the chest. Lieutenant Rostova stood in a doorway, weapons still raised. "Not today," she said coldly. Thorn, seeing his plans collapsing, made a desperate move toward the main control console, likely intending to force the system regardless of consequences. Kane couldn't move without breaking the communion that was stabilizing the network, but he didn't need to. The Elder Xylosian dropped from above, landing on Thorn with the last of his strength. They struggled briefly before both tumbled into a tangle of damaged equipment. Electrical discharge flashed, and Thorn's scream cut off abruptly. Within the network communion, Kane and Lyra sensed the turning point. The invasive control patterns disintegrated, and the natural flow of the biolumina reasserted itself. The violent tremors subsided, replaced by gentle pulses that felt somehow approving, almost grateful. Gradually, the overwhelming connection receded, allowing Kane to become fully aware of his physical surroundings again. He found himself still standing beside Lyra, their hands intertwined within the glowing filaments. As they carefully withdrew, the network continued to pulse steadily, its natural rhythms restored. Around them, the chamber lay in ruins. Most of Thorn's personnel had either fled or been incapacitated by falling debris. Rostova approached cautiously, accompanied by Miller and several TEF soldiers wearing Colonel Bishop's unit insignia. "Reinforcements arrived just in time," Rostova explained. "Bishop sent everything he could spare once he verified your evidence." Kane nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Thorn, dead," Miller confirmed, along with Zark. "The Elder Xylosian as well, I'm afraid." Lyra bowed her head briefly in respect for her fallen elder. He completed his purpose: preserve the network's balance. In the days that followed, the full scope of Thorn's conspiracy unraveled. Records recovered from his private databases revealed a plan that would have granted him and Zark unprecedented power, essentially turning Xylos into a weapon they could control. The environmental devastation would have been catastrophic for both species, regardless of who won the resulting conflict. With Thorn exposed as a traitor and Zark dead, a temporary ceasefire fell across the region. TEF High Command, confronted with evidence of both the conspiracy and the true nature of the Bioluminar network, dispatched diplomatic specialists to begin formal negotiations with legitimate Xylosian representatives. Kane found himself in the unfamiliar role of intermediary, his unique experience with the network communion making him invaluable to the peace process. Lyra, similarly, became a respected voice among her own people, especially as the traditional power structures shifted with Zark's demise and the revealed corruption of certain warm-blood factions. The negotiations were complex and often tense. Centuries of Xylosian social hierarchy could not be reformed overnight, and human expansionist interests did not simply disappear. But the shared understanding that Xylos itself was, in some sense, a living entity deserving of protection created common ground that had not existed before. 1 month after the confrontation at Thorne's facility, Kane stood on an observation platform overlooking a newly established joint research center. Human scientists and Xylosian knowledge keepers worked side by side, studying the bioluminescent network with respect rather than exploitative intent. The first sustainable harvesting protocols for energy crystals had been established, ensuring that collection would not damage the network's vital functions. Kane sensed Lyra's approach before he heard her. After the communion, they remained strangely attuned to each other's presence, another mystery of Xylosian biology that the scientists were eager to study. The Jadescale clan has been granted full protection under the treaty, she reported, coming to stand beside him at the railing. My people will serve as guardians of the primary network nodes, alongside your researchers. That's good news, Kane replied. What about the warm blood hierarchies? Are they accepting these changes? Lyra made the gesture he now recognized as qualified affirmation. They resist but adapt. Loss of Zark removed strongest opposition. Discovery of network's true nature changes many ancient assumptions about who should rule. Kane nodded, understanding the parallels to human society's own struggles with entrenched power and gradual reform. And you? What will you do now that your clan has a secure position? Lyra turned to face him fully, her amber eyes reflecting the sunlight. I made pledge, she said simply, to warm your bed, to stand beside. Commitment remains if welcome. After their shared communion in the network, Kane understood the deeper meaning behind what had once seemed like a strange surrender phrase. It was not about subservience, but about mutual support, shared warmth, and a binding loyalty that transcended conventional relationships. It's welcome, he assured her, reaching out to take her scaled hand in his, a gesture that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. Though I expect we'll face challenges from both our kinds. Not everyone will understand or approve. True harmony never easy, Lyra observed, her scales shifting in what he now recognized as her version of amusement. But worthy journey. As they stood together, overlooking the collaborative future they had helped create, Kane reflected on how far they had come from that first desperate encounter in the jungle. A plea for life had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted, a bond that bridged the divide between species and perhaps pointed toward a new path for both. I will still warm your bed, my human, Lyra said softly, the formal cadence of her speech emphasizing the significance of the renewed pledge. Kane smiled, completion of their shared ritual coming naturally now. And I will protect that warmth, he replied, my warrior. Around them, Xylos continued its ancient cycles, the bioluminescent network pulsing beneath the surface like a planetary heartbeat. No longer a resource to be exploited or a weapon to be wielded, but a shared home to be preserved by those who had finally learned to see beyond their differences.